what happened in the summer is that Lewandowski at Bayern, he tells them that he wants to leave. And so that is the Bayern now require a forward that offers a much more flexibility that Julian Nagelsmann wants. He asks Liverpool that we want Sadio Mane because he can play out wide, he can play through the center. Sadio Mane wants a newer challenge. He's 30. This is the greatest contract that he will be getting at this age, in this point of his career. So he asks Liverpool to allow him to talk to Bayern. And Liverpool, out of respect for everything that Sadio Mane has done for them, allow him to do that. At that conundrum that Liverpool could have had as to who to replace out of Mane or Salah, it's taken out of their hands because immediately Mane is like, okay, I want to go, and they sell him. And that's how they go for Nunez, because they spent 80 million on Nunez and they offset that price by earning 30 to 35 back on Sadio Mane. So that is how that's the one argument as to why the Nunez signing is not as expensive as we think, because that's how, as Ali pointed out, the FSG model works. That they're gonna have to manage how they spend their money depending on how much they earn. The second biggest problem that Liverpool right now have right now, that I said, that psychological exhaustion. I'd just point this out that in 2019 they won the Champions League, and that very season they missed out on the league by 2 points. I mean, they went to 97 points and still did not win the Premier League. And the next season they just went into overdrive. They went mad. They just realized that they could not afford to lose any points against the likes of Manchester City if they are to win the Champions League. And that was the Liverpool City that was the Liverpool at its finest, because City had their drop off and Liverpool started this year like a season on fire. And as City kept dropping points as they want to do, Liverpool kept on winning. And then they had that COVID break, and as things, for better or worse, as things turned out, Liverpool, in the end, after a 30-year break, were finally able to get their hands on the Premier League. And that, I don't think we can, any of us can really express what a psychological toll that takes on the players, on the club, on the community, on the fans, everyone, the weight that a club of that stature had to suffer from to essentially earn that first Premier League. So that phase of 2019 Champions League win and the 2020 Premier League win, psychological burden that it takes a toll on you. It really does. And when that toll is lifted, with it comes a sense of exhaustion, a sense of completion as well. And that brings with itself a sense of exhaustion that is very subconscious. Because I'm not implying that the players deliberately decided, okay, now we're not playing football, we have done everything we can. No, when you get tired, after we've all experienced this in different walks of life. When something like that happens with you, when you succeed in doing something that you've wanted for so long, there comes a phase in which you require some sort of recreation. You enter some kind of transition period in which you just cannot work at that same intensity. And this we noticed that towards the end of the 2019-20 season, in which Liverpool had already secured the title, but then they ended up having very mediocre performances. They drew against Burnley. I remember in the City match that happened after their title was confirmed, they lost 4-0. That was an emphatic defeat for them as well, but nobody cares because they had already secured the title. So again, at the time, that was the psychological exhaustion part that was already flagged up at that time. So the 2021 season, they understand that when the creativity is stunted, when the players are psychologically exhausted, the creativity is stunted. So all these automatisms that you have in your system, they will still prevail. The players will still be able to move the ball and pass the ball around the way you want, because that's how you will be training. But that creativity goes. And they needed that creativity in the midfield. So they brought Thiago Alcantara, who was required at the time. But that season, Liverpool had other issues, because Thiago Alcantara, immediately arriving, had injury issues himself, and the defense was completely obliterated. Because lest we forget, Liverpool that season beat Crystal Palace 7-0 at their home and went top of the league in December. And at that moment, it was feeling like, okay, they might be able to run away with the league again. But as things happened, their defense was completely obliterated. And somehow, miraculously, thanks to their psychological and mental fortitude, they were able to bring the situation back. Alisson scored a goal against West Brom, and they were able to return back to third position. Entering into the 21-22 season, their biggest challenge was, how do we deal with this issue of Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino, and Mo Salah having the same aging at the same time? We needed to replace that. They started doing that by buying Diogo Jota the season before, and eventually they bought Luis Diaz. So those were two replacements were already there. And the 21-22 season, again, the issue of psychological exhaustion comes back. Because while we remember 19 and 20 as two very successful seasons for Liverpool, we don't really take 21-22 into account that much because they did not win the biggest trophies. But we need to remember this, that they played every single competitive match that a football team in Europe could have. They went in, as far as we're going for the quadruple is concerned, they went into all 4 finals. Even in the Premier League, they went into the final day of the season with the title in their grasp, and they almost did win it. And they won the FA Cup, they won the League Cup, they were in the Champions League final, they were in the league for the final day, but they did not win those 2 trophies. Nevertheless, it was a very exhausting season, and they almost went all the way. And once again, when you've reached that part, the next season, there's going to be a bit of transition. The players are going to be on a bit of a downer. We see that with City as well. Even in the season when City won 2 seasons ago, they won the league by 84 points. That was not a big 86 points, I think. That was not a big season for them either. But because United were not capable of catching up with them any more than they could with 74 points, City did not really have a problem. So this is an issue that teams generally do. It's not just a Liverpool thing, but the psychological exhaustion part for them right now is very crucial. Because once again, that is one of the biggest explanations as to why Liverpool have started the season slightly slowly. They are not the only team, because we'll come to Chelsea, and Chelsea has started slowly as well. United, we know how they've started. Arsenal have lost now. City are dropping points as well. So no one team is an uber power at the time. So Liverpool still have enough time to get things into their control. I don't think in the short term, I don't think they have much of a problem, because I think Thiago going out has made things slightly hard for them. But Thiago is going to come back. They have brought R2 Melo because they do not want to repeat the same mistakes they did 2 seasons ago when they ran out of defenders. So they already have 2 midfielders who will be able to provide that creativity and the tempo differentiation that they require in the midfield that they do not get when they have Milner and Edison ahead of Fabinho. And Harvey Elliott, I think Akshita pointed this out. If you take Salah out, who plays on the right? Harvey Elliott can play on the right. Luis Diaz can play on the right. And Harvey Elliott has been converted by Klopp as a number 8 because his progressive skills are quite expedient. He's quite brilliant in that midfield role as well. So I think when Thiago comes back, things will become easier. When Arthur plays, things will become easier. In the short term, I think Liverpool will be fine. This 4-1 defeat for them is enough of a shock that I believe that should be able to spring them back into action. And barring any injuries, I think Liverpool are going to come back into form and they're going to be fine. And Salah's goal-scoring form, I don't think is not much of a problem, because we need to remember that before he came to Liverpool, Salah wasn't really it wasn't a big game goal scorer. He didn't used to score these 30-40 goals a season. He didn't do that in Basel. He didn't do that in Chelsea. He didn't do that in Roma or Fiorentina. He did that in Liverpool. And the requirement of the profile that is required of Salah at this point has changed, because the players, Darwin Núñez is not the same as Sadio Mane, Luis Diaz is not the same as Sadio Mane, and in the middle, if you are to play Diogo Jota or Darwin Núñez, neither of them is the same as Roberto Firmino. So when you have different kind of players, different kind of profiles, the role that Salah is going to be asked to play is also going to change. So I think he will be contributing a lot more than he started. I think things have been slightly difficult for him as well, because he's also trying to acclimatize to this new system. But I think things will be fine. In the short term, Liverpool are going to spring back in form. In the long term, I think the ownership need to be slightly wary, because with Jurgen Klopp throughout his career, there is a pattern that around that 7-year mark, things do tend to start going down, because he lasted at FC Mainz for 7 years. At Borussia Dortmund, he demolished the Bayern monopoly for 2 seasons, but in the end, things went down with Borussia Dortmund as well. They were almost relegated, but they sprang back to qualify for Europa League somehow. But that was also a 7-year affair, and now we are almost reaching the 7-year mark with Klopp here as well. Which is why I was surprised that he extended his contract in the first place, and Liverpool agreed to it, because he isn't really that kind of a guy who sticks around a lot more than 7 years. So as short term, I think footballing wise, Liverpool are fine. I think they'll spring back to form barring any injuries. But this is something that the ownership needs to keep at the back of their head, that they are reaching that mark in which Jurgen Klopp's teams start to dismantle a bit, start to take a bit of a nosedive. So at the end of this season, they might need to have a decision to make. But I think mid-season they are fine. I think Liverpool are going to be perfectly fine, and unless they have any injuries, they're going to spring back into form.